Using a 19mm socket, let's go ahead and remove our lug nuts. Remove the wheel and set it aside. Now with the key turn to the on position, that allows us to go ahead and manually turn our wheels like so. I'm going to go ahead and use our 12mm socket and remove our brake caliper bolts. Good, spin out the bolts and we'll set those aside. We're going to use a small pry bar. I'm going to get it up underneath the caliper and our bracket and just kind of work this off. Once we have our caliper removed, we're going to use our hanger here to go ahead and support the caliper up and out of the way. Let's go ahead and remove our brake pads. Now our brake pads are pretty much frozen in our brake caliper bracket. Just going to use our pry bar and tap the brake pad backing plate, try and work these out. Using a 17mm socket, we're going to go ahead and remove our brake caliper bracket bolts. You want to hold that bracket. As soon as you remove this bolt, it's going to be loose. You don't want it to drop on your foot. Good, pull that off and set it aside. With the caliper and bracket removed, go ahead and you can manually straighten out that wheel. Now on our particular rotor, we have a Phillips head screw here and one here. This is not a structural component, so if yours does not have these two screws or one screw, it is not detrimental to the operation here. We're going to use our impact driver. I'm going to go ahead and loosen this here. Now with both of these loose, go ahead and spin those out with your screwdriver. Go ahead and set those aside. Go ahead and grab your brake rotor. Set that aside. Now installing your brake rotor, you want to make sure that the recessed hole here lines up with our threaded ports here if you have your installation screws. Go ahead and line that up. Get that started. I'm going to do the same for the other. Now, if you don't have these screws, it is not critical to the operation. These are simply retainer screws to hold the rotor onto the hub while you're installing your brakes. Your brakes will work just fine if you do not have these. And install our upper bolt for our bracket. Once we get that bolt caught through threads, we're going to go ahead and do the same for the bottom. Once those are in, we're going to go ahead and snug those down. Just torque down our caliper bracket bolts to 80 foot-pounds. Let's go ahead and bring our brake caliper over. What we want to do next is we want to compress our piston into the caliper itself. Before we do this, we're going to come to this side here. There is a brake bleeder screw here. Ours has a little rubber boot on here. We're going to go ahead and pop that boot off. Yours may not have that. It's not that big of a deal, but it is good because it does protect the bleeder itself. We're going to use a 10mm socket. I'm going to go ahead and loosen this here. Now our particular bleeder screw snapped off. What is supposed to happen is this bleeder screw opens up a few threads. This allows for some brake fluid to start to come out. Once that brake fluid starts to come out, you're going to have a catch can or some rags underneath to catch that fluid. Your next step is to use a compressor here, and we're going to install a original pad here. Install our compressor tool. And what we're going to do is this will work this piston back into the caliper. As this does this here, normally you would have brake fluid. Normally you would have brake fluid come out through that bleeder screw. You push that piston in. Once that is in, remove the tool, remove the pad. You would then go ahead and tighten this bleeder screw. Go ahead and take your pads. You want to go ahead and install these here. The inboard pad will have your squeak tab at the bottom, so that is positioned correctly. Work that into your slides. We'll go ahead and install our outboard pad here. And at this point here, you can go ahead and grab your brake caliper. You want to make sure that your sliders are positioned correctly. Put your caliper on. Install your upper bolt. Once that's got a couple threads, you can go ahead and line up the bottom. Get that installed. Let's go ahead and snug these down. So we had to torque down our caliper bolts to 37 foot-pounds. Now at this point here, you want to go ahead and hop into the vehicle. You want to pump up the brakes. You're going to go underneath the hood, check your brake fluid level, make sure that the level is good. You should be good to go. Let's go ahead and install your wheel. So we're going to get our lug nuts all started by hand. Once these are on, we'll go ahead and snug them down. Let's go ahead and torque our lug nuts down to 80 foot-pounds.